Hey everybody, so it's official. South Africa will not be participating in the Rugby Championship this year. I, for one, am very, very relieved. I think that this was the right decision for many different reasons, which I'm going to talk about now. But there's also some cons as well. There are one or two things that we're going to miss out on, and it's definitely not a win-win situation for us. Either decision we would have made definitely had its cons and its pros as well. But the reason I'm so happy that we aren't participating this year, number one, is because we aren't ready. 100% aren't ready. I mean, it's really unfair to expect us to go into that tournament and win it, because that's what everyone expects from us. We are the world champions, and so we are expected to win the Rugby Championship. We're also the reigning Rugby Championship champions. But of course, New Zealand and Australia have had far more time to prepare. The break between their lockdown and their domestic competition was much shorter as well. It's been many, many months since our guys last played rugby. Yes, some of our European guys have been playing, but that's a whole different situation. So I was definitely concerned that we would go into that tournament and lose badly, and that's the worst thing that can happen for player morale. The last thing we need is another confidence slump. We had that in 2016, we had that in 2017, just where our players lost confidence. We went through a really bad stage in South African rugby, and we don't need that again. So, you know, if you compare it to Argentina, for example, a lot of people think that Argentina, they participating fine with no problems, but I think it's a little bit unfair to compare us to Argentina. You know, Argentina have nothing to lose. You know, no one really expects them to win during a normal rugby championship competition under normal circumstances. So no one's really going to expect them to win. However, we have everything to lose. We really do. So I think it's a good decision. Very, very happy. Player welfare, that's another big one. There's a big chance that if we participated, our players would have gone injured. More players would have gone injured. I mean, we already have a lot of big injuries. Andre Pollard, Achje Snyman, Loet de Jager, Eben Etzebeth, a lot of injuries. And the last thing we need is more key injuries for the British and Irish Lions tour. Another big thing is we aren't prepared for our own game plan. The Springbok game plan is to dominate physically. That is the key element of our game plan. And I mean, our players aren't even prepared for that own game plan. For that game plan to work, your players have to be fit. They have to be conditioned. Our players aren't fit or conditioned enough for international rugby. So not even our own game plan is going to work. I have my doubts, if we did participate in the Rugby Championship, that we would dominate physically. I don't think that would happen. It's a big concern. But another big reason I'm so happy we aren't participating in the Rugby Championship is we get to see a full-strength domestic competition here in South Africa. It's been a while since that's happened, and I'm very excited about it. I think it's going to be very, very cool. I mean, the first round was great, and I loved it. I really did. And there's a lot of young players in Super Rugby Unlocked and the Currie Cup this year who are going to have their game raised big time, because they will be competing with and against Springbok players. And that, of course, automatically raises your game. That is something I'm really excited to see. I think it's going to broaden our player pool and our depth within South African rugby, because those players will be forced to compete at a higher level, because the Springboks are still going to be here during the competition. If our Springboks went overseas to the Rugby Championship, then the level of the Currie Cup and Super Rugby Unlocked would be a lot lower. So I'm really excited to see that. There's a lot of big games coming up, and really, I think I'm even more excited about this than I was about the normal Super Rugby that started at the beginning of this year. So it's awesome. Really, I'm so excited, and it's definitely going to do good for a lot of the young players in South Africa. Let's speak about the cons. There are some cons. Firstly, obviously, we're going to be losing out on some revenue. It doesn't necessarily mean SA Rugby is going to be generating a loss this year, but more likely the profit margin will be a lot smaller. I read that it's in the millions that we will be losing out in revenue by missing the Rugby Championship. So obviously this is an issue, but it's way better than us going to New Zealand and Australia, performing badly, and then like potentially losing sponsors again or something like that. Because if you've seen the Chasing the Sun documentary, that happened. Sponsors left because the Springboks weren't performing well. So even if we did go to the Rugby Championship, it might actually, I think it could potentially make us suffer in the long run. Another downfall of not participating in the Rugby Championship this year is obviously Jacques Nienaber does have less time to prepare for the British and Irish Lions tour coming up next year. So obviously this isn't ideal for him. I feel very sorry for him. He's probably under the worst circumstances ever out of all coaches ever to prepare for a British and Irish Lions tour, at least in the South African context. So it's obviously very tough for him, but what I would love to see is maybe SA Rugby could organise some friendly matches at the end of this year, start of next year, against anyone. Maybe even New Zealand and Australia would be open to that. I think especially New Zealand would be open to that because they're always very keen to play us. So I would love to see that. I feel sorry for Jacques Nienaber, but I would argue that it's more important maintaining our World Cup reputation and our reputation as world champions than winning a British and Irish Lions tour. I'd rather us not be embarrassed this year and lose the British and Irish Lions tour next year. I'm not saying we will lose the British and Irish Lions tour, but if I had to choose between the two, I'd make that decision. But I definitely still think we will find a way to get prepared for the British and Irish Lions tour next year. So that's pretty much my thoughts summed up. Let me know what you guys think. It's a very interesting situation. There's a lot of division in terms of opinion surrounding this. Some people think we scared or whatever, but it's a lot more complicated than that. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. See you next time.